The George Washington National Forest. Christened in 1932 in honor of the first President of the United States, it encompasses nearly 2 million acres of Appalachian splendor in both Virginia and West Virginia. The beauty knows no boundaries, and were it not for the road signs along Route 33, you likely would not even realize that you had crossed from one state into another. Tragically, such idyllic settings are far from immune to crime and tragedy. From Japan's infamous suicide forest to Beachy Head Lighthouse in England, the beauty of these locations can often obscure deep and dark secrets. And in November of 1980, near Rawley Springs, Virginia, one such buried secret was brought to the surface. Now, as with much of the Appalachian region, the remoteness and isolation of this area make it an ideal location not only for personal seclusion, but for criminal seclusion as well. Deep within these thick, dense woods, it is very easy for one to quickly vanish from sight and stay that way. It is equally as easy for one to deposit an item of virtually any size and shape and feel reasonably confident that it will remain hidden for a long time, if not forever. Sometime prior to November of 1980, someone chose to put this theory to the ultimate test when they chose this location as the impromptu burial site for a human body. 39 years later, this secret, which refused to stay buried, is known as the Rawley Springs Jane Doe.
Originally named the Shenandoah National Forest in 1918, this vast section of rugged woodlands was renamed the George Washington National Forest on June 28, 1932. With its soaring mountain peaks, natural hiking trails, and endlessly winding rivers, the region is a mecca for nature lovers and tourists alike. It also serves as an ideal location where one can escape from the noise, traffic, and hustle of city life and simply unwind in an atmosphere of peace and serenity. Covering such a wide and varied landscape, the forest provides opportunities for virtually every type of rural activity. Individual locations are available for hiking, fishing, mountain biking, camping, and even hunting. However, despite the human amenities, this national forest is still just that, a forest, and is not without its dangers. Just as it is easy to disappear and find solitude, it is equally as easy to get just plain lost. Each year, scores of campers, hikers, and regular tourists leave the plotted trails and find themselves stranded in the remote wilderness, often for days at a time. In addition to deer and turkey, the forest is also home to a large population of black bear and bobcat. It is not unheard of for the hunter to suddenly become the hunted. And sadly, the forest can also serve as a secluded home for that most dangerous predator of all, man. On November 14, 1980, the end result of man's often violent nature was once again thrust into the spotlight. That day, a group of friends went turkey hunting in a section of forest near Kephart Run, some 6 miles east of the West Virginia border and roughly 1 mile north of Route 33. The cold weather had already settled upon the Appalachian Plateau, and the trees had long since shed their leaves. At some point, one of the men came upon a toppled log and 2 rocks. Just underneath, and barely visible, the hunter discovered what was unmistakably the badly skeletonized remains of a human being, apparently buried in a shallow grave. The men exited the forest and immediately contacted the Rockingham County Sheriff's Department. Once the scene was secured, a closer examination of the remains was made. From the beginning, it was unfortunately apparent that someone had done a good job at keeping a secret for a long time. The remains consisted entirely of human bones and bone fragments, indicating that they had been buried beneath the toppled log and rocks long enough for any remnants of skin, muscle, and hair to have long since disintegrated. Several of the usual means of identification, including fingerprints as well as eye and hair color, were instantly crossed off the list. A further examination of the makeshift grave did not raise the hopes of investigators. Very little in the way of clothing fragments or personal effects could be found, but one item which was unearthed painted a disquieting picture. A single U.S. dime, believed to have been in the possession of the Doe, bore the date stamp 1964, indicating that the unfortunate soul may have been interred in the Virginia soil for as long as 16 years. Also found amongst the skeletal remains was what appeared to be a badly soiled silk slip, along with white stockings and 4 hooks from a garter belt, suggesting that the Doe may have been murdered before the use of pantyhose became commonplace. Perhaps the most important clue which emerged from the earth was a heart-shaped necklace. With this, authorities were at least able to surmise that the victim was likely an adult female. The skeletal remains were found in this general area, approximately 100 feet off an old logging road which runs parallel to Kephart Run and is roughly 1 mile north of U.S. Route 33. The location, situated in western Rockingham County, is heavily wooded and not easily accessed except by foot or all-terrain vehicle. Authorities at the time described the final resting place of the remains as, quote, the kind of place only hunters would be in, end quote. The remains and personal effects were carefully disinterred and taken to the medical examiner's office in Roanoke for further examination. Once the various segments of bone were laid out, it became apparent that the entire skeleton had not been recovered. The lower portions of the arms, including the hands, as well as 1 foot, could not be found. The intact bones did not give any indication as to the cause of the woman's death. No chips from bullets, nicks from sharp objects, or cranial evidence of blunt force trauma were apparent. Medical examiner David Oxley was able to determine that the Doe was most likely between the ages of 18 and 25, stood between 5 feet and 5 feet 5 inches tall, and weighed approximately 100 to 125 pounds. Most notably, close examination of the Doe's teeth revealed something significant. A distinctive wear pattern along the teeth, familiar to Dr. Oxley, suggested that the unknown female may have often clenched a bobby pin between them, suggesting that she may have worked as either a beautician or a seamstress. Oxley also felt that she may, at some point, have sustained a broken collarbone. He also stated that if the grooves in the teeth were caused by bobby pins, then it likely indicated a date of death sometime in the mid-1960s, as later hairstyles had made the use of bobby pins less frequent. It was also theorized that the Doe may have worked as a nurse. Miss Marion Jameson, the director of nursing services at the Rockingham Memorial Hospital, confirmed that the white stockings found with the remains could indicate that the Doe had been a nurse or worked in a nursing-related field. Jameson went on to state that she was not aware of any other profession where white stockings were worn as a part of the regular uniform. Despite this potentially promising lead, Jameson, who had been associated with Rockingham Memorial for 19 years in 1980, also confirmed that no nurse from that institution had gone missing and not later been located during her tenure. If the Doe was indeed a nurse, it seemed most likely that she was not local. For authorities, it was still not much to go on. At this juncture, about all law enforcement could tell was that they were looking at an average-sized adult female who may have died any time between 1964 and 1978. A check of missing persons from the area over that time period yielded several potential matches. However, each one seemed to fall apart upon closer examination. Authorities faced the daunting reality that they could be looking at a homicide extending as far back as the 1960s, a homicide lacking the identity of both the killer and the victim. The Rockingham County Sheriff's Department later had the remains transported to Virginia Tech for further examination by a team of forensic anthropologists. The Virginia Tech examiners were able to confirm that the Doe had a broken collarbone and that she had probably given birth to at least one child. With few options available, authorities decided that the best course of action was to give the Jane Doe a face. Both the skull and mandible had been recovered intact, and a rudimentary sketch of what the Doe might have looked like was created in 1981. This sketch was significant in that it indicated that the Doe most likely had an asymmetrical nose. The sketch again produced a number of tips, but none of them seemed to pan out. Detective Dan Comer decided to bury his skepticism and consulted noted psychic Noreen Rainier, a respected figure among law enforcement and best remembered for her assistance to the FBI during the Atlanta child killings. Rainier had also worked with the Staunton, Virginia Police Department on a number of rape cases. Rainier advised that she felt certain the Doe was not native to the region and had been murdered. However, she added that the remains were too old for her to hone in on a specific cause of death. She could only hypothesize that the Doe was either strangled or beaten to death, and that the crime had taken place many years earlier. Essentially at a dead end, it was decided to create a 3D rendering of what the Doe might have looked like, using what was originally referred to as facial approximation. This controversial field of anthropology involves taking the complete human skull and applying a malleable substance, usually clay, around its exterior in an attempt to recreate the facial dimensions by estimating the average thickness and texture of tissues and skin. Essentially, what is now called facial reconstruction is a hodgepodge of anthropology, anatomy, and artistry. Despite its subjective nature, the end results have proven accurate enough over the years that it has become recognized as a generally accepted branch of forensic anthropology. The first facial approximation of this Jane Doe was completed in February of 1982. Although a dark wig was added to the molding, authorities stressed that they honestly had no clear indication as to the style or color of the Doe's hair. Again, a number of tips came into the Rockingham County Sheriff's Department, and, again, all seemed to fall apart when scrutinized. Over the next 26 years, sporadic leads and tips were called in. Detective Dan Comer even went so far as to describe several of the leads as promising. However, the case of the Rawley Springs Jane Doe would not make real headlines again until 2008. In February of that year, 31-year-old Nancy Austin was perusing the listings on the Doe Network's webpage when she happened upon the facial reconstruction of the Rawley Springs Jane Doe. She felt certain she recognized the face. Austin was only 2 months old in 1976 when her mother, Georgia Darlene Nolan, leapt from a car following a heated argument with her husband. Nolan was never seen again. Austin felt certain that the face staring back at her from the computer screen was her mother. Austin submitted a sample of her DNA, and a DNA sample was then taken from the bones of the Jane Doe. Sadly, the results did not match. However, the media exposure from Austin's search prompted the FBI to commission a new 3D facial reconstruction of the Raleigh Springs Jane Doe. Most importantly, authorities now had a viable DNA sample to compare with potential relatives. Today, the remains of the Rawley Springs Jane Doe remain packed away in the evidence room at the Rockingham County Sheriff's Department, where they will remain until a positive identification is made. Authorities would like nothing more than to assign a name to this unfortunate soul and provide her with a proper burial and her family with proper closure.
The Rockingham County Sheriff's Department feels that the Rawley Springs Jane Doe may have had connections to the Greensboro, North Carolina area. However, with the exception of the sketch and the 2 3D renderings, very little in the way of new information has been forthcoming in the last 39 years. The Sheriff's Department is not giving up, and they urge anyone with information on this woman's identity to come forward. And as always, we ask that you please pay close attention to the following summation. Maybe you hold that one piece of missing information that can help to put a name to this face, and quite possibly to her killer as well.
The remains of the Rawley Springs Jane Doe were located on November 14, 1980 in Rockingham County, Virginia, approximately 6 miles east of the West Virginia border. The skeletal remnants were found approximately 100 feet off an old logging road which runs parallel to Kephart Run. The location is heavily wooded but can be accessed by foot or all-terrain vehicle. The remains had been buried in a shallow grave and covered with 2 rocks and a log. Along with the partially complete skeleton, authorities also recovered what may have been remnants of a silk slip, a pair of white stockings, and 4 hooks from a garter belt. Also found were a heart-shaped necklace and a U.S. dime stamped with the date 1964. Distinctive grooves found in the doe's teeth indicate that she may have often held bobby pins between her teeth. Authorities have estimated that the Jane Doe likely died approximately 10 to 15 years prior to her discovery. This estimation is based on the general condition of the remains, as well as the decreased use of garter belts and bobby pins during the 1970s. The Rawley Springs Jane Doe is estimated to have been between 18 to 25 years of age at the time of her death. She was Caucasian and would have stood between 5 feet and 5 feet 5 inches tall and weighed between 100 and 125 pounds. Her nose was likely asymmetrical. She may have worked as either a nurse, a beautician, or a seamstress, and it is likely that she gave birth to at least 1 child during her lifetime. Although an exact cause of death cannot be determined, authorities feel that the obvious attempt to conceal the remains strongly indicates foul play. They do not believe the doe was native to Rockingham County and feel she may have had ties to the Greensboro, North Carolina area. If you have any information on the identity of the Rawley Springs Jane Doe, please contact Detective Kathy Hensley with the Rockingham County Sheriff's Department at the number listed below.